I sucked at being a leader, right? Because to you, like micromanage, do it the way that I did it because that's how it was successful. Like I never, early on, I never let anybody be themselves. I always tried to get them to be a carbon copy of me because that is what was successful.
Yeah.
And so, if anyone's listening, if I was a crappy manager to you, I apologize. But it's like you have to learn and grow.
Sometimes people are better being individual contributors, and managers isn't necessarily the next step. You can be a great individual contributor and rise through the ranks and being that expert, that functional expert, the industry expert, whatever it is. And you can definitely grow through the ranks as an individual contributor. Management isn't all that it's cracked up to be. I've had a great experience since being told how bad I was. But you have to learn and you have to want to have a growth mindset to be able to go, okay, like then I need to really, if I really want this role and I really want to do this, I've got to improve the skills, right?
Because nobody prepares you for people management, right? Welcome to the She's So Sweet podcast, where we interview accomplished women who have worked their way to the C-suite. I'm your host, Christy Felteruso, Chief Customer Officer and award-winning Customer Success Executive. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Sam Loveland, Chief Customer Officer at Salesloft. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Christy. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so excited to share your story. You have quite the background, and we're going to dig into that momentarily. But before we get started, I'd love for you to tell the listeners a little bit about your role as Chief Customer Officer, and if you can share a little bit about Salesloft.
Sure. Well, I've been the Chief Customer Officer here at Salesloft for the past since July of last year, so about 10 months in. And what a Chief Customer Officer entails is I run the customer success and renewals function. I run the professional services team, customer education, and customer support. And what is Salesloft? So Salesloft is a revenue orchestration platform. We bring buyers and sellers together in the right moment at the right time so that sellers can really maximize the outcomes that they get. So meaning for them, it's a bigger pipeline, closing more deals and bringing them in quarter and, getting their paychecks at the end of the day.
Now, Salesloft is definitely kind of, I think, cornered the market as the leader in this space, right?
We believe so.
I've been a customer. In fact, before it was Salesloft, there was a different name for the company. Do you remember?
I actually don't know that. I should know it off the top of my head, but way before my time, and I should remember it. I was going to say we just bought a company called Drift, and so, but yeah, I don't know our predecessor company. Do you know it?
I can't remember. I used it before it was Salesloft, and then I remember the rebranding to Salesloft, and I did not know that Salesloft just recently acquired Drift.
Yes, we did back in February. So we're really excited about that because, Drift, that really brings the buyer intent signals to the salespeople at the right time and brings the right messaging. And so we're really excited about the acquisition.
That's a really natural one, too. That makes a ton of sense to bring those two brands together. That's really exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, we are going to spend a couple minutes digging into some pivotal decisions in a bit, but I have to just say, I did obviously my homework studying your background and the logos of the brands that you have worked at. I'm like sitting here, I'm like, this is like the who's who of tech. You've been at ServiceNow, Salesforce, HelloSign, Financial Force, Microsoft. You had time at Deloitte. Like you have had quite the run.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. And I say, I've been there at the right time, at the right moment. And, using kind of like my personal, kind of where I was in my personal life, right? Raising kids, growing a family. And sometimes those, made those decisions. I'll talk about the Deloitte story, interestingly. So I spent 8.5 years at Deloitte, loved every minute of it, learned a ton. But I had 2 young kids at that point. I was on the road every week. And I was going up to Seattle. For a customer. And finally, my 2-year-old at the time was like, Mom, I don't like Adel. And I'm like, who's Adel? He interpreted Seattle, that I was meeting a person named Adel. It broke my heart. I was like, oh my God. And my husband looked at me and he's like, see, you travel way too much.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And so that was really like a pivotal moment for me, around like, do I want this to be my lifestyle? Meaning, as a partner, in a, any type of consulting organization, you tend to be on the road a lot. And so I had to make the tough decision that, maybe I needed to look at something else. And then the next funny story is, I was in the CRM practice, so customer relationship practice at Deloitte. And, back in the day, Siebel was the named brand recognition. And there was this small company called Salesloft. And we actually, and I was a senior manager at the time. And, the partner that I was with, we lost 2 deals to Salesforce. And we were like, what is this company? And I was like, well, if you can't beat them, join them. Perfect opportunity. And they were looking for somebody to start their enterprise services practice. And so I was lucky enough to get in on the bandwagon and ride that wave for about 7 years and learned a ton there and, really kind of defined what customer success was for customers. So it was very exciting.
That's such an impressive journey. We're going to get into all of that. I love that so much. Okay. So I always like to ask my guest, because I know that at no point when you're little did you ever say, you know what, I can't wait to be the chief customer officer of blank company, right? So at least I assume that that's not the case. But tell me a little bit about kind of where you were when you were younger. What did you think that you were going to be when you grew up? And then how did those career aspirations kind of manifest to where you are today?
Yeah, well, I'm going to laugh. I don't think chief customer officer existed back then. I'm going to say software as a service, technology didn't, right? Like I will age myself on that one, and it definitely didn't exist. But my mother's Asian, and so I don't want to be stereotypical, but very common in Asian family. Education is very important. And, really kind of, you either are a lawyer, you're a doctor, or you're an engineer, right? Like you had to have a profession. And so I lean towards the doctor route. I'm not really sure 100% why, maybe because I visited a lot of doctors and thought, okay, I could be a doctor. But that epically failed the minute I had to get my blood drawn when I was about 16. I passed out. I was like, okay, clearly I can't look at blood. And so that changed that story. Ironically, my 2 kids are going down that path. So I have one in medical school. Wow. So they somehow must have passed down to their gene about
you passed the baton.
So that was what I wanted to be.
That's great. Now, there was a big pivot because obviously we didn't go the route of being a doctor. So then when you were starting higher education, what kind of career path did you pursue then?
Well, another change then too, right? So my father was a tech geek, and this is where I'm going to age myself, right? He brought home like one of the first like home computers, the big machines that, you have to carry around and, not your laptops. And he brought it home and, let me play with it. And so I got into, computer programming, like learned my first experience doing computer programming. So I was like, okay, I could do this. And so I went to school and undergraduate school as a computer science major. I lasted a quarter as I sat in the room of 150 kids in your first computer science class. I was one woman of 2 in a class of 150. And I was like, I don't want to be doing a career where it's all male dominated. And said, I need to look at something else. So I went, we didn't have a business degree at my college. So I went with quantitative economics and decision sciences. So economics and math, a lot of math, and, kind of went that career. But, you never know what kind of throws at you, right? So my first job out of college, though, ironically, with Bank of America in doing computer programming. So, and they taught you
that
everything.
Just came full circle for you.
Yeah, just totally full circle. So I never got out of technology. I still love it. Hence why I'm in this career and this business. But, you just never know. And you kind of take the opportunity and you run with it.
So this brings up a valid point here, because I think you hit on something here. You went and pursued, like there was something you were interested in, and you were deterred because you didn't see folks who looked like you in that degree. And so you decided to make a change. And I think that's why this podcast and these types of conversations are so important, because it is true, right? Like you can't be what you can't see. And it's really hard for folks to envision themselves in roles that they don't see folks like themselves in. Yeah. So, I mean, you had an early story of that experience.
Yeah, 100% agree. Right. And so, my early mentors were all men. Right. I didn't really have a lot of women in the computer, science background or even in the banking industry. It was all very male dominated. And so, they were my mentors, but it was also hard, right? Like it's not relatable for them because, again, back in the day, the women were the one that stayed at home and raised the kids. Now it's very
Right.
different, right? Like there's more, more men, or it's more even in terms of who stays at home and who raises the kids. And so, hard for people to understand like the balance that you're trying to do in, being with your family as well as, taking care of your own career and where you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar. I've had a lot of male role models and mentors in my life, and it's just not the same. I get value from them. They've been super supportive in many cases, but it's not the same as having those female connections and those folks who are like you and can relate a little bit more to the things that you're navigating.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we've already hit on some of the changes that you've made in your career. Obviously, you've been at some of these fantastic companies, and I want to dig into that a bit more because obviously there's some pivotal moments in your career that got you to where you are today. So I want you to do some reflecting here for us today as we all listen to this. But so, what were some of those real pivotal moments for you professionally that contributed to your ascent to the C-suite?
Yeah, I mean, I always took stock, every, couple of years, like where am I today? Am I enjoying what I do? Where do I see myself in the next few years? And then, and also balancing like where my family is, meaning like, are they in high school? Were they in middle school? What was important for them and being there for them at the right pivotal moments as well. And so that was really important for me to always kind of take stock in where I was, both as, my personal life as well as my professional life and where I wanted to take things. And, I really enjoy, working. I love working. I don't know, I will retire at some point, but I really enjoy it. And, but I always love to learn, right? Just learning, either new skills, new people, new products. And, so for me, building and learning and developing is really important. And so, if I feel like I'm stagnating at a company or maybe I'm not growing and developing, then that's like the time for me to look at the next opportunity and where I can contribute, but also where I can grow and develop. And so those are the things that I look at as I look at my career and where I've made my pivotal changes.
So obviously you made a change, this big leap from being at Bank of America and then went
Yep.
to Deloitte. So let's start with that. So what kind of drove that change to go from that role, which actually seemed like it was more closely aligned with what you thought you'd be doing because that's what you were originally pursuing in school. So then why make that change? And sound like you had a positive experience that taught you a ton.
Yeah, no. Well, the break in between was, so I worked at B of A. I actually worked at Barclays after that, and I was doing computer programming, and I was getting bored, and so I was like, what do I want to do? And ironically, at Bank of America, I was working more in the investment banking division for computer, for their programs, and was like, oh, I think I want to be an investment banker. Well, what do I need to do? Well, I need to go to grad school. And so I decided to get my MBA, went to Columbia because I wanted to be on Wall Street, and be able to work the street. And interestingly enough, my first quarter, all my friends that came from investment banking were like, don't do it. You're soft. They make it sound glamorous, getting limo rides at 2 a.m. back home, but you're turning around at 5 a.m. It's just really not worth it.
Yep.
And especially again, if do you want to have a family? Like it's really not conducive towards that. And so again, flipped and went more like the consulting finance background major. And that was where I had the first opportunity to work at Deloitte as a summer intern out of their New York office and really enjoyed it. But I met my husband at graduate school and he's like, well, I'm going to California, we have to move back to California. He's from New York. And I was like, well, I'm not going to move back unless there's a ring on my finger. So I'm going to continue my job search here in New York. and so he put the ring on the finger. And so I ended up transferring my offer from New York to San Francisco and, had the rest of my time at Deloitte in San Francisco.
Okay. No, first of all, I love that story. For women listening, please get some commitment before you make life-changing decisions and chase somebody across the country.
Move,
so
I
love that. I love that. Let's not pick up and leave just yet. Okay, so then we went from Deloitte and now this is where we start to pivot into tech, right?
Yeah, into tech. Yeah.
So so this is where it said your children and raising a family started to have a little bit of a weight there now at this point,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah, definitely a big weight. And so that was really, and like I said, I never thought I was going to leave Deloitte, but, didn't really understand the the balance that you have to have between work and life. And, I wanted to also spend time with my kids. It was important for me to be there when they needed me and to do that. And so, as I was looking around, looking at companies where more of the job, ironically, I ended up traveling a lot at Salesforce, so we could go through that. But, in the beginning it wasn't. And so, looking around at different companies, what do they do, having that. And I'm lucky enough, to live in the Bay Area where there are a lot of companies. This was, the .com boom is there, but there's also a lot of, I'll call it more brick and mortar type of companies that are out there as well, like Genentech and others. And so, really an opportunity to look at what did I want to do. But of course, I'm a techie geek at heart. And so going to, product company was exciting. And going to a company that, was beating out like the name, the old school Siebels and Oracles, and that was exciting. And so wanted to join them in the early days and help build, help them build where they wanted to go next. So that was exciting.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a tough question. We're going to take Salesloft out of this equation, okay? Because they're your current employer, and obviously you should love them the most. What company did you enjoy working at the most? From all of the, again, from Barclays and Bank of America, Deloitte, you had, again, great companies. People would kill to be a part of some of these journeys.
Yeah.
What did you love? Which company did you love working at the most?
I will actually say, so I've learned a lot from every company that I've been at. But actually, I will say Yammer was actually the most fun. So for those that don't know Yammer, because Yammer is not around anymore, it was acquired by Microsoft. You do see still some Twitter posts that they do, and it's embedded into the Microsoft Office suite. But that was great. It was a very young and scrappy company. We had a lot of great investors in the company. And so we just had fun. Like we worked long hours, early in the morning, late in the evening, because it was a startup. But just learned a ton. And, really that was my first foray. It didn't exist then, into a chief customer officer role, but having everything post sales in my remit was exciting. And learned a ton. But 6 months after I joined, we were acquired by Microsoft. But that was exciting too, right? Like just a different, I got to now work at a company like Microsoft and a big name company, and learn from that experience too. But I'd say like that was a lot of fun. Like we learned a ton. A lot of the people that we worked with there are now at Salesloft, so that's probably kind of what I would.
That's cool. That's fun to see that come full circle for you. Okay. Yeah. Well, we talked about some of these pivotal moments, and we also know that getting to where we are in our career doesn't come without some hardship. And I would love for you to kind of reflect back and let us know, what are some of like those obstacles that you had to overcome? What were some of the challenges that you had to navigate over the course of your career?
Yeah. I think for me, the hardest navigation has been like the work-life balance and identifying what was important for me at the moment. And, certain times career was important and I wanted to take that leap. Like I said, when I was early in the days at Deloitte, I wanted to be a partner, but, hey, family came in and, I had to rethink that. Right. And so there were those moments where, I may have done a lateral move to another organization, right? Typically you go to other companies to, take the next leap, right? Take the next leap in title or whatever responsibility. And a few times I had to do more of a lateral move, and those were okay. Like it was okay for me because in the moment, that was what was important for me. And in that moment, spending more time with my kids, helping them, I didn't want to miss, a sporting event. And so I wanted to be at a company where I didn't have to travel as much. And it afforded me the opportunity to do the kids drop off. I didn't do kids pick up. My husband, luckily he works in New York hours. So he did kids pick up, but we were able to balance that. And it was great, for that time. But then, of course I get a little antsy, I get a little bored and like, okay, the kids are now like at a good stage and, where they're at, they're all getting ready to go to college. So now I can look at another job. Right. And so look at something that will advance my career or get me to the next level. And so, I think those are, like hardships in terms of like tough decisions that you have to make and, a sacrifice that you have to take a step back or more of a lateral move in order to balance out, what was also important to me from a personal perspective.
You raise a good point. And I think that there's a lot of early moms, right? First-time moms who are struggling with that same decision because there is this push-pull, right? Like, you've got very ambitious women who want to pursue their careers and continue to, climb up the ladder, whatever that looks like for them. Then you have this pull at home, and it is tough to find that balance. And I would often almost say that there isn't really balance ever. It's just, to your point, it's about prioritizing what's important at any given stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fortunate, I have a great partner, and he doesn't travel, for his job. And so it makes it easier when we have some of these, conflicts and have to work through it. But, I think, if I didn't have his support, for wanting to, build my career and where I want to go, it would be tough, even tougher decision or a tougher situation too.
Yeah, I always tell folks, I'm like, the greatest life hack ever is to find a partner that is supportive of your ambitions, right? Because you can't do it without somebody who's going to be there by your side, who is an equal partner in helping you pursue all the things that you're chasing.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
Now let's talk about this. So like, obviously you're a woman, you're in tech, you've been around here for a while, you've seen a lot of things. Now, you've also been in this where it hasn't had enough female leadership and females in general, right? In tech, there wasn't a lot of us for a long time. What were some of the things that you observed kind of early in your career as you started to break into tech as it relates to kind of what you saw or how you were navigating things?
Yeah, I mean, it's not until the last few years, right, that you really see, females in C-level executive positions. I mean, probably the most common, and I don't want to offend anybody. The chief people officers, CHROs are critical, right? But you typically saw them in that role, but no other roles. And so, now it's great to see, like, women being CEOs or chief product officers, right? Like, I don't want, Salesloft, I have the luxury of having a chief product officer. And that was one of the reasons why I came, because I was like, wow, that's fantastic to have a woman that's leading the charge on product definition, because that's one of the roles that you don't see very often at all. Like if you do see C-levels, a lot of chief customer officers are female, and that, but so that's been exciting to see kind of that break and that change happening. Also, from just forgetting kind of the C-level executives, it's also great to see kind of the diversification, even in the individual contributors or people that are, kind of early in their careers, and the mix that you're seeing now of a lot more females. There, we were talking earlier about the STEM career, and seeing women or girls go the STEM route is so exciting, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be computer engineering, but they love sciences, right? They love math. It's not just for boys or for men, which was kind of traditionally what you saw. And so just seeing those changes is exciting. I'm excited about my daughter and her friends and what they're doing, and for them to have female role models now in whatever career they decide to go to or they have gone to is nice to see.
I love that. And obviously you and I share a similar story there. My daughter, as she's pursuing her college career now, or as we're starting to look for them, that's the route that she wants to go. And like I shared with you, it's important for me that she see women like yourself and others just doing really courageous things and breaking those ceilings and just being very successful. Right. Okay. So now one of the things that I talk to women about all the time, like it is easy for us to rattle off a list of challenges or obstacles or failures or things that didn't go well or as planned. But I feel like we're just not talking enough about our successes. And so I want to do some celebration here with you, because again, with your track record, you probably have a lot to celebrate. So as you reflect back on your professional career, what would you say have been some of your proudest moments or your biggest accomplishments?
God, oh my God, you're really putting me on the spot there. God, I'm trying to think, like, what was my biggest accomplishments? I mean, taking, like I used Yammer already as an example, and seeing that, right? But at ServiceNow, the last 4.5 years before I joined Salesloft, like, I got to take a product to market, and when I talk about product, it was a customer success product, right? A post-sales product, and never done that before, never build a product from the ground up. Doing the markets research, or working with a marketing organization around the research. What would people even pay or buy this offering? What would it look like? Was exciting, right? And that was different and unique. And so, I think that was one kind of linchpin related to that. Becoming chief customer officer at Salesloft, that was like another key milestone and excitement there. So there's a ton of ton of great wins. And, I talked already about a few, just coming to Salesforce, right? And, in the early days, like no one knew the name. Like, when I told people,
I was going to
like,
say,
who
like
do
the
you work
early
for?
Salesforce.
Yeah. Like, who do you work for? I'm like, Salesforce. They're like, what? What do they do? Like, and having to explain, what, they did. And now it's like, and, everybody knows who Salesforce is and
Household
that. And
name.
so
Yep.
household
I
name,
think
right?
even if you're not in tech, you know what Salesforce is.
Exactly. Right. Well, they also like sponsor so many different things, but so I think those are like at the time I didn't know they were great, and then looking back, I'm like, wow, that was really a great opportunity that I didn't even know I had, and that even going to a small company, a Yammer, and then getting bought by Microsoft, right? Like you don't know how great that opportunity was until it's past and you reflect back and you're like, wow, that was a really great opportunity. Even ServiceNow, like when I went to ServiceNow, I mean, it was a multi-billion-dollar company, but the rise from the last 4.5 years to where they are today is amazing. That tremendous growth, right, and great leadership team and what they've been able to put in place there. And so, but again, you're like, wow, like when I joined ServiceNow, most people didn't know who ServiceNow was, and now they're recognized by everybody, right? So it's just kind of being there at the right time. And I will always say I've been very fortunate and very lucky to kind of roll into those spots. But it's been a tremendous career looking back on it.
It's so nice to kind of just hear the reflection, right? Because oftentimes we're in those moments and we don't realize how exciting, how impactful it is on us, on the companies that we're a part of, the teams that we have the privilege of leading. And so I'm sure you've made a huge, tremendous impact and left a good impression on the organizations that you've been a part of. The She's So Sweet podcast is brought to you by Client Success. Client Success is an all-in-one customer success platform to help post-sale implementation and success teams manage customers from new to renew. Through an industry-leading platform approach, Client Success gives businesses an in-depth view into customer health, product usage trends, along with churn and risk data so that your team can not only retain customers, but help them grow as well. Whether it's managing customer onboarding workflows in shared portals, building custom health scores, tracking sentiment with NPS surveys, or doing more with less through AI and automations, Client Success gives customer success professionals a true one-stop platform to manage all aspects of the customer journey. To learn more about the industry's fastest to implement customer success platform, visit www.clientsuccess.com. That's Client Success. Simple, powerful customer success. I always say, like, I struggled myself professionally with a lack of female leaders that I saw, folks that was, could serve as mentors and guides for me. I'm like a fail forward kind of gal, but I don't want that for everybody. And I know that you don't either, Sam. We talked about like even your aspirations for like what your daughter and her friends see. So how are you empowering women? Because I love that saying, empowered women empower women. And I do believe that is so true, is this pay it forward kind of mindset that a lot of great leaders have. So how are you contributing to that? How are you helping empower other women?
Yeah, I mean, it's so true that we need to like pay it forward, right? And there's different ways to pay it forward, but for me, it's really about mentorship, and mentoring other women, whether they're at my current company or even past companies, and continuing to stay in touch with them and help them think through what's next for them, and giving them guidance, and if they're working for me or part of my organization, giving them stretch assignments, right? And I think when you sit down, if you're like earlier in your career and you're sitting with your manager, talk to them about, what is it that you aspire to, right? If you don't ask and you don't tell them, they don't know. And so, really have those, courageous or vulnerable conversations about where you want to be. And then, those leaders will help you, right? Identifying those stretch assignments that you might be able to assign to them because, hey, you told them this is what you want to do. And so I think it's important to communicate your desires and where you want to go. It doesn't necessarily always work out, right? But at least you communicated it and you shared where you wanted to be. And I think that's a critical part of your growth, and reflecting on what you want to do and articulating that to others so that they can help you.
I love that. So let's dig into this a little bit here, because I think mentorship is so important. And I love to see leaders like yourself making those investments of time and wisdom. What are you hearing thematically as you are connecting with women who are earlier in their career, or they have aspirations of being leaders? Maybe they're early first-time leaders. What are some of the struggles that you feel are very prevalent in folks today?
God, good question. I mean, I think it kind of varies on where they're at in their career and what their struggles are. I think oftentimes, it's really like taking stock in themselves and understanding like what's important to them and where they want to be, right? And it, and I always tell people it's not necessarily a title that you have to go after, right? Title is important, but like what is it that you want to be known for? What is it that you want to be, and use that more at versus like, hey, I want to go be the CEO and this is what I want to go do, right? Like what is it that you enjoy doing? And then what are what are the attributes that you need to build to be able to continue to grow and build those skill sets, right? And so I think it's being able to articulate that and understand it. And then I think what's also important, you often feel that people look only like the next job, right? And so, I always tell people like, well, next job is important, but ultimately, where do you want to be 3, 5, 10 years down the road? And then how do you kind of lay the foundation to get there, right? Because that's what's important, is like the ultimate end goal, not just kind of the steps in between. But once you know what your end goal is, then you can kind of define that path that's going to help get you there. And it might take you to, multiple different paths to get there, right? Because, if CEO is truly what you want to be, then maybe a great experience is to move outside of your functional domain and expertise and do something that you've never done before, right? And so if you've always been in sales, maybe you should try your hand at post sales, or you should try your hand at product, and be able to get a varied experience, because then when you do become CEO, you have that richness of background, and can identify it, and then be able to build a strong team underneath you that can help support you, that are really those functional experts, but at least you have better knowledge in those areas.
That's such wise advice. Something else that I see, and let me know if you're seeing something similar, is that a lot of women are chasing just to your point, the role that's in front of them. So you mentioned kind of title chasing, which I think is normal, and everyone does it, and everyone wants the title because they feel like it defines value for them. But I often see people who just believe that the next role is to move up into these management positions. And I always tell folks, people leadership is the hardest part of any job I have
Oh,
ever had. And it takes special people to really thrive in those roles. So when you have somebody who is just making the assumption like, yep, okay, I'm an IC today, my next step is to management, how do you coach them? What advice do you offer them?
well, before I go to advice, I will tell you a very funny story. It was early in my
Oh,
career at
please.
Deloitte. And, so, you go from senior consultant to manager, right? And it'll address your question, right? Which is you become a manager because you're very good at the job that you do, right? You are a very good individual contributor, and you're very good at that job. And therefore they promote you, because to your point, that's what people assume.
Yep.
The next job is a manager job. So in any event, I was promoted to manager, and I got my, we don't really have bosses in consulting, right? But I had a partner, mentor, and he came in one day and he's like, I'm going to just break it down to you. You suck as a manager. And I was like, I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, my team's hitting their deadline. We're on time. We're on budget. Like, I don't understand. Like, we're doing great. And he's like, yeah, but you're not managing the team, right? Like, you're micromanaging them, and you're like doing their work for them, and you're not coaching them to be their best selves. And, manager isn't about doing the job. It's about how you grow and coach the people beneath you to do the job that you need them to do. And, you can set direction, you can set goals, but ultimately they might get to it differently than you do, right? Like, you operate a certain way and you kind of look at A to B in a straight line. They might need to like zigzag a little. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that was kind of shitty, but it was great, right? Like, he was very honest and very to the
Yep.
point. And I was like, okay, that's what, if I want to be a manager. And he even said, he goes, you may not want to be a manager. We can find different paths for you to take, but if that's what you want to do, then this is what you need to do. And so that was eye opening. So now back to your question. So yes, I learned to be a better manager and better leader over the over the years, but it's a tough job. And, and sometimes people are better being individual contributors, and, managers isn't necessarily the next step. You can be a great individual contributor and rise through the ranks and being that expert, that functional expert, the industry expert, whatever it is. And you can definitely grow through the ranks as an individual contributor, because you have that functional technical expertise, whatever it is that no one else can do. Right. And that's the value that you bring to the organization. And so, management isn't all that it's cracked up to be. I've had a great experience since being told how bad I was. But you have to learn, and you have to want to have a growth mindset to be able to go, okay, like, then I need to really, if I really want this role and I really want to do this, I've got to improve the skills. Right. And so, that was definitely a learning moment, not a highlight.
I feel like, Sam, I wish I would have had some direct leaders myself, because I'm sure I would have gotten very similar feedback. Because nobody prepares you for people management, right? Very rarely do I hear organizations making investments in helping folks through that transitional period. Because to your point, I was always a great IC. And right, that's actually what, to your point, got me that next step into leadership. But I sucked at being a leader, right? Because to you, like, micromanage, do it the way that I did it, because that's how it was successful. Like, I never, early on, I never let anybody be themselves. I always tried to get them to be a carbon copy of me, because that is what was successful.
Yeah.
And so, if anyone's listening, if I was a crappy manager to you, I apologize. But it's like you have to learn and grow. But it would be nice. It would be nice if more companies made investments and put people back into like these management training programs, right? That used to exist forever ago, right? Companies actually used to make huge investments in grooming leaders and getting them trained. And like, you had these transitional periods of like shadowing people and doing it a little bit. And just, there was huge investments. And now it's like, okay, good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, to that end, like, what I try to do when people tell me like, hey, I want to be a manager, would I try to give them an assignment where they're like a project manager for a cross-functional team where they have to lead a group of folks to deliver an end product. And that's usually a great way for them to kind of suss out like, well, do I like this? I've got to manage a bunch of people with different skill sets and different backgrounds, and and like you said, doing things a little bit differently than what I'm used to, right? But ultimately you get to the same end objectives. And so I think that's a great test bed, whether you give them a project management assignment or you give them a team lead assignment, player coach, different things that you can do without like taking the full jump into I'm a manager now. And letting them fail, right? Because they haven't truly tested it out. They just feel that, oh, manager is my next step in my career.
Yeah, we need to just keep emphasizing that to folks, that it's not for everybody. And it's okay if you pursue a career as an IC, you could still be wildly successful.
Yeah. Very successful.
I hate that it has like this negative connotation, right? Like you don't need a team. You don't have a global organization that you're running. Some days I wish I didn't. Some days I wish I was still an IC. I'd have more control over my destiny. All right. Well, Greg, I'm glad that we share a similar mindset around that. So we've kind of given this advice forward. Now I kind of want you to think about yourself and, advice you wish you would have had earlier in your career. Because obviously you're doing a great job of offering folks wisdom and advice. What's there one piece of advice you feel like you wish you had earlier in your career? Mm-hmm. And how do you feel like having that would have changed your trajectory?
That's interesting. I think the advice that I wish I would have had, like, and it's more of a common term now. And so I think people do it, but, I think as women, we're told to be strong, and we're mm-hmm. told to not say sorry, and more importantly, not ask for help, right? Like help is a sign of weakness and that. And so, I think I really kind of resonated like, oh, I really can't ask for help, because if I ask for help, then they're going to see me as weaker or not confident yep. or anything like that. Right. And so, now you hear more the term about being vulnerable, right? And being vulnerable, and it's okay to be vulnerable, and you ask for help or you don't know it. And that's more accepted. And so I wish that was more of a common term when I was growing up in my career, because there were probably, not probably, there were mistakes that I made because I didn't ask for help, because I was afraid to ask for help because it would make it feel that I wasn't competent enough, or, hey, that's because it's a woman doing the job and a man could do it better, or whatever the reason, right? And so, I wish that that people would have told me that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to ask for help, because back then it was seen as a sign of weakness, and now it's seen as a sign of strength. That like, hey, a leader is asking for help. Wow, like they're being vulnerable, they're being courageous, they're putting themselves out there, and it didn't have that same connotation, I think, when I was growing up in my career.
No, I totally agree. And like even now, I think asking for help is seen as a superpower, right?
Yeah.
Like people that know how to do that. And it kind of is in line with that, like, work harder, work smarter, not harder. If I spent more time actually just leaning into my resources and my network and asking for help, I would have been working smarter and not harder. How many hours I wasted trying to figure things out, how many times I failed because I didn't know what to do. And it's sad that so many of us had those experiences to the detriment of people and companies and revenue, probably, because that just was the state. That was the way it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So with that, let's talk about this growth mindset, because we kind of hit on this a little bit. I believe that we're lifetime learners, and I think that that's been evident in kind of your career trajectory, right? Like you always want to learn, you're intellectually curious, and you want that growth. So how are you making that investment in yourself? What are some of the things that you do daily, weekly, monthly that you feel like are investments back in your personal and professional growth?
I think the is to proactively seek feedback. I gave the story about, how my mentor came to me and told me I suck, right? I didn't solicit that feedback, but it was good to get that feedback. And another one of my former leaders, always said feedback is a gift, right? And you can think of it as being scary, right? Like, that was daunting when, that former partner told me like you suck and you're that, but I was like honest feedback. And so, so but if you don't have that feedback, I would never have gotten better, right? I
Right.
would never have been able to be a better manager and leader, and be able to go forward. And so, feedback is a gift. And yes, it can be scary to sometimes get that feedback that, you think you might be perfect in all areas, and you get feedback like, wow, you're not really good here, right? But take that as a learning opportunity, and how you can get better and what you can do differently to take your career to the next level. So, I think feedback is a gift, and ask for feedback, solicit feedback. Like we don't. This isn't about feedback, but like we ask our customers, what is our grade? Like if you were to grade us,
Right.
is A, B, C, D, or F, right? And asking for that can be daunting and can be scary. But like if you don't know that, you might be thinking like, well, account's going great, everything looks good. In our terminology, we have health scores, right? Are you red, yellow, green? You're like, it's green. Like, no, that's not a problem. And then you get to the renewal and you're like, well, you're not going to get the renewal, right? I learned, someone told me once, like it was a watermelon account, right? It was green on the surface and you cut it open, it was red inside. I was like, yeah. So why not get in front of it by asking for the grade, and how are you doing? And so, feedback is a gift. And if you don't ask it, you may make the wrong assumption and think you're doing great, or, whatever. And you can learn from it.
So I have to ask for some like tactical advice here. So you're sitting in a C-level position. How are you soliciting feedback from folks that are in your organization? Because I think it's not easy for people to give feedback, just as it's difficult to receive it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very hard for maybe somebody who's early in their career to go to maybe skipping several layers of management to be like, well, Sam, actually, you could have ran that meeting better. Or, so how do you professionally create a safe and open environment where people feel like it's okay to provide feedback? Because I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, 360-degree feedbacks are great to do, right? And and you provide to your, manager, or I guess in my case, I would provide it to the CEO, but like, who are the people that, they should reach out to, and kind of your peer level, cross-functional groups, people that report into you, to get that feedback. And then it's anonymous, right? Somebody else is doing it. It's anonymous, or it goes into a system that's anonymized, depending on, what companies are using, to give that feedback. And I think that's what's important, to do that. But, I do ask like, hey, we just ran this 2-day meeting. Like, what could I have done differently? What could we have done differently together, and, to improve it for the next time. And so, just asking those reflection questions are also good too.
I think that's great. And I think that that's something that leaders need to figure out how to do a better job of, because we all say, yeah, we're open to feedback, open door, tell us anything. But it's different if you're not creating a safe environment, right? Or creating the anonymity so that people can say what's true.
Yeah.
And I think the same goes with customers too. I'm sure that you've had similar experiences. I've asked customers like, hey, give me feedback. And they don't want to tell me anything. And then all of a sudden they get on the phone with their CEO. And then it's like, all of a sudden they look very chirpy. And it's like, okay, where did we fail in creating a safe environment for you to provide feedback? And I know CSM struggle with it, right? Because I'm sure you see this, right? You'll talk to a customer and you'll hear something very different than the CSM might hear. So I think we all just need to be cognizant of how do we create these safe spaces for folks, because feedback is a gift and it is important for all of us to continue to grow and evolve. So I love it that you're doing that. I hope those are some great tips on how you go about soliciting that. Okay, so before we wrap up today, I wanna leave our listeners with a major takeaway. We've covered so much here today, and your journey is really remarkable. But what is the one thing you want our listeners to take away with them after this?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it comes across, but I love what I do, right? And we spend more than half our lives, or at least when you get to my age, you spend more than half your life, working. So you need to love what you do, and also the people that you work with, right? And so it's great to find that fit of where you want to be and you want to belong. But I think the other one last thing that I'll say is, like, don't forget to prioritize time for yourself. I think especially as females, we tend to prioritize time for everybody else and we don't take stock in ourselves and what's important for us. And so whether that's exercise, reading a book, going, someone told me they go in their shower and lock the door for 30 minutes so they don't get bothered by their kids and, kids and husband, right? I was like, okay, that's your Zen moment. That's okay, right?
Take it.
Take it. And so, that would be my guidance is, don't forget to take stock in yourself as well.
I love that. And it is something that I think more folks need to prioritize, especially I would say mothers to young children. It is so easy to be serving everyone else, but you can't pour from an empty cup. So I love leaving us with that advice, Sam, today, in addition to loving what you do. And it is evident. It did come through in today's episode. You very much are passionate about your career trajectory and the work that you're blessed to do. But I love both of those. So thank you, Sam, so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Your journey really is inspiring, and hopefully everyone took away as much goodness as I did from our conversation.
Well, thank you, Christy, for having me here.
Very good. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode, please rate and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Hi, guys. I want to share a bit about an organization that I support called Wednesday Women. They're on a mission to increase the visibility of executive women leaders that you should know, learn from, and be inspired by. On LinkedIn, they share the profile of 2 amazing women each week, on Wednesdays, of course. And now just imagine if we all followed, amplified, and nominated the women that we want to see more of. Their initiative provides examples of women CEOs, founders, sales executives, technical leaders, and so many more. By supporting Wednesday Women, you'll see more of these professionals in your social feeds, of course, but also on stages, podcasts, and panels. If you're interested in learning more and supporting their initiative, head over to www.wednesdaywomen.org or follow them on LinkedIn.